Oh, this cap and trade. What is this cap and trade? I'll tell you. It's in Liberty and Tyranny also. My producer, Rich, just said to me, God, everything that's going on today or that went on yesterday is in this book. Yes, it is. And it's only over a little 200 pages in length. So the solution to this so-called global warming is the innocuous-sounding cap-and-trade proposal. For the conservative, this is the most oppressive economic scheme yet to be advanced by the statist. The way it would work is that the federal government would dictate greenhouse gas emission levels. That is, carbon dioxide, among others, with emphasis on carbon dioxide from fossil fuel use. In a relatively short period of time, the government would mandate the steady reduction of the levels of emissions overall, and for particular industries that would be legally permitted. Companies that emit less carbon dioxide and other gases than legally allowed by the federal government could sell the excess allotments to companies that emit more. And the companies that emit more than their allotted amount would face stiff penalties and fines. So how would this be policed? The federal government would need to create a vast IRS-type bureaucracy to set allowance levels and process permits, collect data, monitor and audit compliance, investigate alleged violations, and ultimately enforce emission standards and levels through penalties, fines, and litigation. Every company that uses fossil fuels and emits carbon dioxide would likely be affected. And let me add here, so would you. So would your house, so would your automobile. If you're a farmer, you already know they're going after your livestock. Anything and everything. Not a joke. Every company that uses and emits carbon dioxide would be affected. Individual companies and entire industries would be at the mercy of the federal government's arbitrary determinations. And since the government's role will be the enforcement of its own emission rules and regulations, since there would be no bureaucracy serving as a counterweight promoting economic growth and free markets, it would be little concerned with the economic consequences of its decisions. Indeed, the stringency of the emission standards would never permit a net excess of emission allowances to offset the amount of emission overages, because to do so would defeat the purpose of the scheme. For individual companies, buying excess carbon emissions would become extremely expensive, resulting in part from price competition. They might be required to reduce production and output, go out of business altogether if their profit margins are tight, or relocate abroad to avoid the emission standards, like to India or China perhaps. The jobs lost, wealth destroyed, progress stymied, and resources diverted are a minor import to the enviro-statist who's in a rush to adopt the cap-and-trade scheme. So, ladies and gentlemen, when you hear we want a market-oriented cap-and-trade system, which is what Obama said today, don't be fooled by the language of the Marxist. Don't be fooled by the language. They never use the right words because the right words would expose their wrong actions. This will kill the American economy once and for all and turn our economy into a second or third rate economy over time. There's no question about it. Particularly when the Chinese and the Indians are on the ascendancy. It would also significantly impede on your liberty. The government more and more would have to wring out the abusers and the violators of these new requirements, none of which exist today, but which will be smothering tomorrow. Companies will go out of business. And that's okay for the statist. He doesn't care. He doesn't care about wealth creation. He doesn't care about liberty. He doesn't care about private property. Listen to Obama. Listen to Pelosi. Listen to them. Don't get me wrong. They want to acquire as much of it as they can for themselves. But in order to do so, they need to punish you. They need to punish you. And we had the ridiculous proposed regulation shot down, but it will be back from the EPA to limit methane from livestock and to tax it. This is no joke. Oh, after you get a good belly laugh, think about it. Think about it. Look at what's going on in Britain and other places in Europe regarding obesity rules. And there was even a proposal, which I point out in Liberty and Tyranny, that individuals would have carbon footprint cards, if you will. Just a proposal, but so many of these proposals wind up being law and fact, limiting how much carbon an individual can expend. I don't mean from their own body, but I mean in their everyday activities, from their cars, from their homes, what they eat, and so forth. Ladies and gentlemen, you wonder why I get angry at some of these callers who call up and keep wanting to attack Bush and support Obama? They're missing the entire picture. Liberty is on the line, and it's not just Obama. It's Clinton, it's Gore, it's Pelosi, it's Reid, it's the whole bunch of them. We have a Democrat Party that used to make the claim that it stood for the little guy who wants to imprison the little guy. And by the way, who wants to keep the little guy little. If the little guy actually comes up with an idea and decides he wants to market it and make some money, that cannot be tolerated. He has to work in whatever industries that the statist gives his imprimatur to. He has to do the jobs that the statist gives his imprimatur to. He has to expend the energy, and no more, that the statist gives his imprimatur to. He has to be what the statist demands, or there will be some form of repression and suppression. Some form of punishment, whether taxation or something else. So it is through the environment, the so-called environmental movement, appendages essentially of an authoritarian government, through which the statist will have his greatest success. Because people say they want clean air and clean water, and why wouldn't they? I want clean air and clean water too. This has nothing to do with that. This has to do with a hatred of liberty, mobility, private property, and prosperity.